So we've got a lot of people joining us today from various different professional backgrounds. We're really pleased to have such a wide variety of professionals joining us to talk about this work that we have had ongoing in Surrey for a couple of years now. I'm going to start by introducing Rights of Women for anybody who's not familiar with us. So Rights of Women is a legal rights charity. We're committed to securing justice, equality, and safety in the law for all women. And we do that in a number of ways. Our core services are that we provide legal advice to women on our advice lines across family law, criminal law, immigration and asylum, and sexual harassment at work. And advice is available from women lawyers who are qualified to give that advice, and women call us up and ask us for advice every day. We also publish legal guides and handbooks that are all available for free on our website. We deliver training for professionals who work with survivors of both domestic abuse and other forms of violence against women and girls. And we conduct a lot of policy and campaigning work to try and improve the law and policy for women. So the project that we are going to talk about today, which we have called the Family Justice and Domestic Abuse Partnership, has its roots in the Harm Report. So the background to this work is all based on the experiences of the women that we come across at Rights of Women on our advice services every day about the problems that they experience accessing justice in the family courts. And in 2020, the Ministry of Justice published a large piece of research called the Harm Report, or it gets known as the Harm Report. And it really reflected the experiences of the survivors that we speak to at Rights of Women. It identified that there are a number of systemic issues that result in the family court's handling of private children law cases where domestic abuse is an issue, or is causing harm in some circumstances to both the adult and child survivors of domestic abuse who are accessing the court, expecting to find protection and not always being able to access that. What the Harm Report recommended, amongst a long list of recommendations about how to improve the experience in the family court for survivors of domestic abuse in private children cases, was a set of design principles for the family court. Those design principles are that there should be a culture of safety and protection from harm. The approach within the court should attempt to be as investigative and problem-solving as possible. That different parts of the system need to be better coordinated with each other, and that resources need to be used effectively but also sufficient to meet those aims. It recommended that court processes should meet the needs of children and unrepresented parties rather than the lawyers that are working within the system, and that domestic abuse and other safeguarding concerns should be central considerations. We were very pleased at Rights of Women that the majority of the recommendations made in the Harm Report were picked up by government and are slowly being implemented. But reform is a slow process. Some of that includes changes that were introduced to the Domestic Abuse Act in 2021. And probably the largest shift is the Pathfinder courts in Wales and parts of England, which are still in pilot phase, moving into rollout across England. And although we have seen that there are steps forward at Rights of Women, we also still frequently come across problems arising. The experiences of the women that we advise at Rights of Women continue to be problematic. They continue to experience harm. They continue to experience the minimisation of domestic abuse identified in the Harm Report. And we also often come across quite a divide between those discussions at a national policy level about the implementation of changes and the reform that's needed, and how that actually filters down into best practice at a local level. Implementation of best practice at a local level is a well-known challenge. It's not unique to family justice or the family courts, but we quite often come across this this divide between the people at local level who are being told there are all these problems in the family justice system, and that question about how do they start to address them. So that's why in 2023 we sought some funding to work in a local family justice area, trying to improve the experiences of survivors of domestic abuse and their children going through the family court with the principles of design in the harm report and that parallel family justice reform work in mind, but thinking also more broadly than private children proceedings, which is specifically what the harm report addresses. And we started looking for a local area that might be interested in working with us to try and improve that local practice and think about how that could be done. So we ended up in Surrey. And at the end of 2023, we started bringing together professionals in Surrey across essentially whoever would speak to us, who was working within family justice, coming into contact with the family courts, whether that was lawyers, the judiciary, magistrates, CAFCASS, children's services, HMCTS, but also local law centres, the Office for Police and Crime Commissioning, contact centres, whoever would come and talk to us about the work that was going on locally or local practice. We wanted to speak to them. And we started running workshops and bringing professionals together to have discussions about the barriers to good practice, learning from each other in relation to what the problems were, but also thinking about what actions could they take at a local level to try and improve things. Sometimes those conversations were challenging, sometimes there was some defensiveness, but we always came together in a space that was held for the potential that there might be disagreement, but the recognition that we were all committed to the key outcome, which was that we don't want the family court to be causing further harm to survivors of domestic abuse. The partners that we were working with then in Surrey then took a lot of that work away with them and tried to implement it. So it ended up focusing around 3 themes, which mirrored the principles in the harm report around culture change, the journey through the court, and joint working. And what we're going to do is we are going to hear from our partners in Surrey, who are the people who have actually done some of the work. So I'm going to hand over in a moment to my colleague Jo, who's going to chair a panel with some of those partners. We couldn't get everybody in the room. We ended up with a list of 50 different email addresses and people that were on our mailing list about this work. So we have not been able to include everybody or have all of the work that's gone on reflected. And we're sorry about that, but we have brought together a group of professionals who were quite key to continuing that work. What was, however, really important to us and central to ensuring that the work was successful was that the experiences of the survivors actually going through court proceedings were part of the conversation. And we were really lucky in Surrey that there was an already established survivor engagement group called DAC. It's supported by one of the local domestic abuse support services, ESTAS, and they're a group of survivors who come together with the aim of trying to change things for other survivors. So we were really privileged to be able to meet with them, be part of the conversations and try to bring them into the conversations we were having with local professionals. So before we go to our panel to discuss the work that was going on, we're going to hear from Kerry, who is one of the survivors from DAC and who's going to reflect on her experiences of the Family Justice and Domestic Abuse Partnership and the engagement of DAC in that work. I'm going to hand over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Olive. Thank you for asking me to speak today. DAC has been working in Surrey since March 2021. We are women who have directly experienced domestic abuse, and women who have lost close family members to femicide as a result of domestic abuse. Our aim is to put survivors at the heart of what you do, to keep survivor voices central to policy and decision-making, firmly placing the responsibility for this onto the professionals that we come into contact with. I often compare working with survivors to archaeology, uncovering meaning from the ruins left by devastating events. No single fragment tells the whole story. Understanding requires collaboration, communication, and humility. Survivors are the vessels, and without working together, professionals risk missing hidden evidence with tragic consequences for families and lives. Entering this project felt risky for DA Scene. For many of us, and for me personally, the family court space has been one of the most damaging environments we have encountered. We all recognise that domestic abuse causes trauma, yet trauma is deeply personal. It belongs to the individual to define. Too often, when survivors try to articulate their reality, systems respond in ways that feel dismissive, coercive, blaming, or minimising. That may not be the intention of professionals, but intention does not lessen impact. This was my experience navigating these processes, and it remains the experience of the survivors I work with today. From a survivor's perspective, this partnership has felt empowering, not extractive. It has been ethical, intentional, and genuinely collaborative, with power truly shared and lived experience respected as expertise. Communication has been clear and consistent, and DA Scene's voices have been actively sought, valued, and acted upon at every stage. When systems truly listen, connect, and work together, survivors no longer carry the burden alone, and real, lasting change becomes possible. Since our inception in 2021, we have also experienced more extractive approaches, where painful lived experience is shared to inform policy or practice, but little support, influence, feedback, or change is offered in return. In those moments, survivors can feel mined for insight rather than respected as partners. One of the most powerful impacts of this partnership was an exercise we created called the Wall of Blame and Shame. Attendees confronted real victim-blaming statements made to us by professionals, each one a brick in a wall that shifts responsibility from perpetrators onto survivors. As the wall grew, we revealed the real-world consequences of this blame: isolation, suicide, femicide. I shared how my 17-year-old son stood on a motorway bridge after being unable to access support for his trauma. We then heard directly from the women of DA Scene, who they are, what they have achieved despite these barriers. The message was unmistakable. When a wall of blame and shame exists, survivors cannot fully be seen for their resilience, their credibility, or their humanity. The room fell silent. Many were in tears as the weight of that truth landed. The impact of the exercise was immediate and real. The local authority approached us for the first time with funding and invited us to help shape and inform their domestic abuse strategy before it was embedded into policy. More importantly, it changed professional behaviour. One legal representative shared that it completely altered her practice outside of the courtroom. Casual social conversations with colleagues representing alleged perpetrators, once seen as harmless, were recognised as potentially distressing and shaming for survivors. Those conversations stopped. The exercise ensured survivor perspective was no longer an afterthought, but central to how professionals work. The recent safeguarding review into the tragic death of 10-year-old Surrey schoolgirl Sarah Sharif highlighted a critical point. Although significant information about risk existed, it was fragmented across multiple agencies and systems. In Surrey, our work with Rights of Women, including the development of a systems map, has shown just how complex and overwhelming these interconnected systems are, and how each professional interaction can have either a positive or harmful ripple effect. Survivors are expected to navigate and connect systems that they've never been trained to understand, often acting as the go-between while carrying the burden of competing demands. To illustrate why systems maps are so vital, I want you to consider a real-life comparison. I'd like you to think of the following organisations: Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Ocado, Marks and Spencer's, Asda, Lidl, Morrisons and Aldi. Now, right now in this moment, I need you to remember and recall all of their processes for self-scan, self-checkout, online ordering, click and collect, home delivery, requesting refunds, customer service principles, and even the individual themes of their Christmas adverts last year. And I need you to be able to remember all of them and operate within all of that and recall all of it right now in this moment. Can you do it? Probably not. Yet that is what is expected of survivors navigating multiple complex systems without prior training, guidance or support. There used to be a television programme called Supermarket Sweep, and contestants answered quick-fire questions and then raced through an unfamiliar landscape in a time-limited fashion for a prize. That is what survivors face in real life, across multiple systems. And the prize? Safety, stability, and life itself. Falling through the gaps in a system feels like being unseen in plain sight. You're still here, but the net that should hold you has holes too wide for anyone to notice until you've already slipped away. When the system catches you, it feels like landing in a pair of steady hands. The fall stops, the fear eases, and you remember that safety isn't just an idea, but something you can lean into. My ask to everyone here today is simple. Centre lived experience in every aspect of your work. Listen to survivors, respect their expertise, and design systems and policies that reduce harm rather than compound it. We still have a lot to learn, and you won't always get it right, but that should not stop us from trying, reflecting, and improving. This project and partnership is demonstrating the power of bringing agencies together, face to face, in a room, creating space for dialogue and collaboration that is beginning to drive change in systems that can otherwise feel deadlocked and resistant. Survivors carry vital insight. It is your responsibility as professionals to act on it ethically and collaboratively. When we do, we not only prevent harm, we save lives and we create space for survivors to thrive. Thank you, Olive.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Everyone, good afternoon. My name is Jo Shaw and I'm one of the legal officers at Rights of Women in the Family and Crime team. And what we're now going to have after that, those reflections from Kerry, is we're going to broaden the discussion out to invite other people who were involved in this partnership to speak about what it's been like for them being involved. So I'm going to introduce them. If you could turn your cameras on as I introduce you, that would be great. So Kerry is going to be with us still. So thank you, Kerry. We're also going to have Alice Riches, who is the Safer Communities Strategic Lead and also works in the violence against women and girls work at Surrey County Council. Thank you, Alice. We have Fiamma Pather, who is the Chief Executive of the Your Sanctuary organisation, one of the specialist domestic abuse services in Surrey, and she's also the chair of the local Family Justice Board subgroup on domestic abuse. So thank you, Fiamma. And we have Chatura Patel, who is from Surrey Children's Services. So welcome to you, Chatura. And we have Professor Liz Williams, who is the Professor of Legal Education and Director of Clinical Educational Programmes at the University of Surrey. And you all nailed that, turning your cameras on at the right time. Amazing. Okay, so everyone, we're going to have some overall questions for the panel that I'm going to put to them. And then there will be an opportunity, time dependent, for some questions from you as attendees. So if you'd like to ask a question, please put it in the chat. I will manage that when we get to the end of the set questions that we have, and we'll see how we go with time. We have about 30 minutes for this section. Okay, so we're going to hear now about how this partnership has worked and what some of the issues are that have been highlighted. And firstly, we're going to reflect on positive impacts. And Alice, I'm going to come to you first as a surprise. So from the perspective of the Community Safety Partnership and the strategic work at Surrey County Council, how has this partnership made a difference?
Thanks, Jo. I wasn't expecting to be first, actually, and I've made my notes, so I'll be concise. Hi, everyone. So I think one of the key things for me was around the cultural change aspect. I'm a stickler for culture change, particularly around, as Kerry said earlier, around the language we use, and the concept of trauma-informed working. I feel that particularly within our sector, and when we talk about statutory sectors as well, trauma-informed has become very buzzwordy, in my opinion, without people understanding what it fully means and what that fully looks like, particularly when we're adopting an anti-victim blaming approach. I hear a lot of the time around kind of worrying about taking sides and impartiality, but that to me represents a misunderstanding of what trauma-informed practice actually looks like, and that it means kind of fair and consistent approach to survivors and having that person-centered approach. I would go as far as to say, you know, if we aren't working in a trauma-informed way and we are victim blaming, that is inherently subjective and entrenched in bias. So the cultural aspect was really important for me, particularly in the room when we were discussing as a partnership. After the presentation from, I've forgotten her name, but she was from health, she was a health colleague with trauma-informed practice. There was kind of comments around it being a fluffy approach or fluffy language to use. And that kind of made me wince a bit, because I think it shows kind of the misinterpretation of what trauma-informed means. You can still have challenging and difficult conversations with the people you're working with, but it's about safety, collaboration and transparency. So that was one of the key aspects for me, key reflections.
Thank you, Alice. Chatura, I'm going to come to you next. Before I do that, I just want to make clear for everyone in the questions, we are not going to be able to deal with questions about anyone's particular case or situation. So please don't put in questions like that. We're not going to be able to deal with them, I'm afraid. That's not what today is about. And if you do have a question about your legal rights, you can always call Rights of Women. Okay, so I'll just put that little plug in there. So now, Chatura, I'm going to come to you and ask about the impact for you and for your colleagues in Surrey Children's Services from this partnership.
Thank you, Jo. I'm really appreciative of the space that Rights for Women created for me and for other professionals. It was within that space that I, for the first time, heard Kerry and the work that she's done with DA Scene. That was an extremely powerful exercise, and it really made me think, because it is truly at the heart of our work that we need to be aware, not just aware, but to allow the experiences, the lived experiences of survivors to shape the work that we do. It's been fantastic that Kerry and Alice have done a great deal of work with the local authority in terms of creating awareness and helping people shift from victim blaming language. And we have been able to bring in the safe and together approach that focuses on perpetrators of domestic abuse and focuses on making sure that we understand the patterns of behavior that not only influence parenting capacity of survivors, but also the harm and the multiplicity of the harm that children experience. So we are rolling that out, and at the same time, we are coming back to your space, the space that you created, from where, for me, a lot of this actually started. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Jatura. I'm going to come now to you, Liz. So, I mean, it's a bit of a surprise maybe for people to see someone from a university here, and it's part of the partnership we've been able to involve people from maybe where you wouldn't necessarily think of having people involved in this work. But what would you say has been the impact for the university and the work you've been able to do?
Well, it's been really exceptional, I think, from our perspective. Thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, everybody. The partnership workshops really did provide us with a unique opportunity to connect with professionals across various disciplines, but these interactions, coupled with listening and learning from survivors, DA scene, and learning from practitioners as well, gave us invaluable insights that we just really would not have otherwise gained at all or had the opportunity to do so. So from this collaboration, and also the suggestion and the support of Rights of Women and Firebird, our law school's Access to Justice Clinic were able to introduce a community legal outreach collaboration. It's called CLOC, and it originated at Keele University. So we set this up last November before, I should say, in partnership with Guildford Family Courts. And again, this initiative just would not have been possible, just would not have happened without the foundation that was laid by these workshops and the people that we met. So as a result of which, our law students are providing a really important service. They're also gaining invaluable hands-on experience, and they receive support and training from the lawyers from local law firms that we met at the workshops, as well as the survivors, DA scene, and also professionals such as CAFCAS, court staff, lawyers from the law firms, judges in the courts, and the students are acting as community legal companions for litigants in person. So they assist the litigants in person before or during hearings, and helping them to navigate the complexities of the court processes. So I won't go through all of those activities, initiatives that they're helping with, but it really has been an extremely important and unique learning experience for all of us here in Surrey Law School. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Liz, so much. Brilliant. Okay. And so on this question, I'm going to come now to you, Fiamma, and just ask you, from the perspective of the domestic abuse specialist services in Surrey, what have been the outcomes for you?
Thanks, Joe. We had a very strong partnership existing as you came into the county in terms of the DA services. So I think that was a distinct benefit as we came into these workshops. However, that space that everybody has talked about enabled us to meet people like the amazing Liz and Chatura, people that we really didn't know and that we had no experience with up until that point. And to be able to have those really important open conversations about an area that we heard from our survivors that we were supporting all the time about how traumatic they found the family court and the whole family justice system. Being able to have those conversations with judges in the room, with magistrates, solicitors was absolutely enlightening. It certainly helped me understand the process much more deeply than I had done before. It helped us all understand our different perspectives much more deeply than we had done before. You know, you can become quite entrenched in your own field of work. And I think, being able to sit in rooms and really hear what people were saying and their own challenges in their own organisations was really enlightening. And that led us on to a particular piece of work, certainly centred around the court buildings, simple things that actually survivors found very complicated and very distressing, trying to navigate around a court building. We were able to go in and train ushers and security personnel and admin staff to be much more aware of those sorts of challenges that survivors will come across. Simple things like making sure their name isn't put onto a door of a waiting room, so that they can remain anonymous and feel safer. Other ways of navigating around the building, which they all found really, really helpful. So that would not have happened had it not been for those workshops and introducing ourselves to all those different members of the court processes. So thank you.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to stay with you, Fiamma, now. So what I'd now like to move us on to is looking at what some of the challenges have been or some of the barriers. Obviously, I introduced you, Fiamma, as the chair of the domestic abuse subgroup for the local Family Justice Board, and which overall is a very positive step. But in reflecting on that group and the project overall, what would you say are the biggest challenges or obstacles?
So before I start, absolutely very, very grateful that the LFJB opened their doors to me, allowed me to sit on the main board, and then allowed me to set up this DA subgroup. But we're very early days yet. I've only been to about 4 or 5 of the main board meetings. We've only been able to hold 2 of the DA subgroup meetings. And I would say that around that particular table, we've got people from all sorts of different organisations, and we're very grateful for the time that they're giving for that. But I think and so we've merrily got on with our action plan and this, that, and the other, and then kind of came back to the main board, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, expecting to be greeted with open arms, and just kind of felt like we sort of came into a bit of a brick wall, understandably, because we have the great privilege in the DA services of working in a way that is very trauma-informed and believes when somebody comes forward and says they're a domestic abuse survivor, we believe them and we work with them on that basis. Obviously, the courts have to come at it from a different perspective, and as Alice has referred to, this sort of perspective of neutrality and not being able to make any decisions about things until there was evidence put forward. And so what we have found is our language is very different and our culture is very different, and the way that we work with survivors is very, very different. And so I think my expectations were somewhat unrealistic in that I thought, well, once I've said X, Y, and Z, everybody will see that and just make the changes that I expect them to make. And that has obviously not been the case. And so I think this is going to be and you'll probably all think, well, obviously, but this is going to be a very long-term piece of work where we're going to have to really start from the roots up, not make any assumptions, really try and understand one another. And I think what will also be helpful is the other work that is going on in Surrey. So the brilliant work that Alice does around victim blaming language, the brilliant work that Chatura has spoken about around Safe and Together, so that all professionals in Surrey start to really pivot their attention, if you like, towards perpetrators rather than what are the survivors going to do about the situation. So in thinking about this, it's actually got to be a whole system approach. I don't think me sitting on a DA subgroup is going to do it on its own with the best will in the world. And therefore, these other initiatives that are going on in Surrey are going to really support that work. And the more people that are getting on board and singing the same message, I think the stronger the work will be.
Thank you, Fiamma. Kerry, what about for you? Any of the challenges or obstacles you foresee?
So I think for me, one of the challenges we have to think about is who takes on this work when Rights of Women moves out. And it's not a quick process. We haven't finished yet. And I think this work will probably take a number of years to embed. And anyone looking in might assume that perhaps this work would, and carrying on this work, would sit well with one agency, for example, the local Family Justice Board. However, I think we have to act with caution and remember that there are many parts to the system and each comes with inherent bias. So in my mind, it needs to be a panel, perhaps with the local Family Justice Board and the Community Safety Partnership, to ensure that many sides have representation. However, what that looks like with the disbanding of police and crime commissioners, and ours particularly does a lot of work in the VAUG space, and with the local authority restructure that's going on, I don't know. And also I've been in spaces locally recently where I felt resistance to take on the learning from Sarah Shrew's safeguarding review. And that kind of speaks to wider issues nationally that we've known about for years from other reviews. Women and children are dying every week, and the learning is there for a reason. And it's uncomfortable to say that we can keep on doing something the same way we have because it works, because clearly for some it doesn't, and it can have tragic consequences.
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. Okay, Chatura, I'm going to come to you for any observations you have on challenges.
Thank you, Jo. I think I will echo what Fiamma and Kerry have said. You see, culture change takes time and it needs consistent effort to embed it. We really need our partners to come on board, especially from the police and from health. Even with the Safe and Together training, we really need them to come on board so that the approach that we're trying to, embed is embedded across the piece. The problems of not doing that are considerable. We really need to come at it from similar points of view. And this is, it's not so much about being neutral in my mind. It is more about being objective and being supportive of the non-abusive parent and the survivor and the children who are also survivors and victims in their own right, to actually be able to carry out robust assessments that actually keep the best interests of children at their heart.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite you, if you can be brief, please do, okay, everyone. So I'm going to invite people to reflect on any advice for other areas thinking about doing this work. And I'm going to come to Alice and Chatura and then Fiamma. And then what we're going to do is have some questions, hopefully, from the attendees. So Alice, over to you. Any suggestions for other areas?
Yeah, this one's really tricky because, as it was alluded to, we're in a really kind of unique and challenging period in Surrey coming up with local government reorganisation and the disbandment of the PCCs, as well as health colleagues going under a huge mass restructure. We have been so lucky and privileged that Rights of Women have kind of been that independent body, which has allowed, I think, us as a multi-agency to have shared ownership over this project and shared accountability in particular. Sometimes in partnership work, there can be slopey shoulders and finger pointing when actually it's a joint responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. And I think that's been made really clear in the new National VAUG strategy. But we need to look inward at ourselves and how we are going to take this work forward. work is underway going forward in February. We have a strategic workshop to look at how we're going to action some of this work, which Rights of Women have kindly lent their time to come and deliver kind of an overview of what this project has entailed. It's really kind of, I guess, difficult to give advice when there's so much unknown. I think what I would say is that lessons learned and the resistance to lessons being learned is frankly an insult to victims and survivors being murdered by perpetrators. To learn the same lessons over and over again, we are clearly not getting it right. And I think we cannot lose sight of all of this amazing work that Rights of Women started, and it's our responsibility to take this forward. It's slow, it's very frustrating working in local government. Policy is snail's pace, but victims and survivors and perpetrators do not care if there's a local government reorganisation. They do not care about PCCs being disbanded, and we cannot let victims, survivors or perpetrators fall through the gap. So it's so important that we carry this as a partnership and create that foundation that remains adaptable and flexible through huge change. Right. And I think many of us in the partnership are on the same page about that. Sorry, I keep it.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Alice. Chatura, any reflections for you on advice for other areas?
I think that space that was created by Rights of Women, if we could replicate that in other areas, that would be hugely helpful, simply because that is the base from which people can actually go out and do work, but also come back and bring learning into that space. So
right.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Thank you. And Fiamma, anything for you?
Yeah, I think, and it might have been my naivety, but I think it would have been helpful perhaps for us all to set expectations earlier on. I thought we could change everything just, sitting in Guildford, and obviously we can't. So I think setting expectations, what can we affect locally and what can't we? Being ambitious, absolutely, but understanding what we can change and what we can't. And also for those of us not in the legal profession, maybe to have a sort of a starting point of who understands what and bringing everybody up to sort of the same level so that everybody is kind of starting from the same level of knowledge around family court systems would be helpful. So that would be my advice to other groups setting off on this journey for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Now what I'm going to do is try and find some questions to ask, and we've got about 4 minutes or maybe 5 if we're lucky. So I'm just going to try. Thank you for the questions in the chat. I'm obviously not going to get to all of them. Yes, so Helen has asked, how much do you feel the change has depended on individual people? Is the change achieved fragile if they leave? Anyone want to reflect on that? And it doesn't mean that everyone on the panel, but anyone want to say anything about that? If you do, just take yourself off mute. Go ahead, Fiamma.
I'm happy to take that. Yeah, I think to an extent, it does take individuals to put themselves into this work. So that's a fantastic thing. That's what it takes. But yes, it does make it fragile. So you then, as that person who may have taken that step forward, you need to make sure that you're bringing your organisations along with you and making sure that everybody is kind of understanding what the work is, so that if you do have to leave or you've left, that there are others behind you to take up the work. So it's as most things, it's a pro and it's a con.
Okay, thank you. Chatura, I'm going to come to you because we've had a question about Safe and Together. So they've asked, was this linked to the Roe partnership? And if so, could you talk more about how it sat within the partnership and so on? So if you could just touch on that briefly, how Safe and Together came about, if you can.
So I think Safe and Together has come about as part of the learning from the tragic death of Sarah Sharif. What has helped with the Roe partnership is that we, the implementation of the Safe and Together has been alongside partnership, alongside partners, many of whom are part of the Roe partnership. We have started pilot in the southeast of Surrey, and it has included some of the partners who are here today, on the panel as well. So in many ways, it has been connected with Roe, although it has not started off as part of rights of women, if that helps.
Great. Thank you, Chatura. Liz, we had a question about CLOC and the students, and someone was asking what stage the students were at in their studies. Can you just speak to that?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, they're final year students, and we also have master's students. So they would volunteer to be in court on one afternoon a week. So we're there Tuesdays, some Wednesdays and Thursdays, so a morning or afternoon. And then the training sessions take place in the school. So we're very fortunate that, as I say, that we met Kerry from DA Scene and Joe and the various lawyers from the law firms at the workshops at Kafkas and ESDAS and so on, so that we now have so many people that we can go to who can actually train our students. And they either come into the law school, or we provide the training online. So yes, they're final year and master's students as well, undergraduate final year and masters.
Thank you, Liz. Kerry, I'm going to come to you finally. This is a question about the VAUG strategy. So see how you get on. Okay. So basically, someone has asked, I hope the government VAUG strategy can act as additional pressure to ensure services do better for survivors and recognise the current system doesn't work for many people. It feels like services truly need to be held accountable, and this is often lacking in a meaningful way. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the VAUG strategy in tackling domestic abuse in the family justice system? That is a big question, Kerry. You've got about 30 seconds. Okay.
I think it's a big ask. I think it's the foundations of a starting point. I don't think it's the entire answer. I think it's a very good starting point. I think there are parts within it that haven't been included before. I still feel that male child survivors are not visible enough within that strategy. I feel that they're kind of sat to one side. It's such a big thing, and until we see the implementation of it, I think it's actually quite difficult to comment on, because I think what's written can be quite different to what becomes into practice.
Yes.
And also with the repeal of the presumption of contact going through as well, we don't know what that's going to look like, how it's going to be embedded. So I think it's really difficult to answer that question at the moment, because everything is kind of quite up in the air. Until we see it sort of starting to be embedded, then we'll know, I think, better whether it's going to be beneficial for survivors or not.
So some welcome things, and watch this space as ever. Okay, we're going to draw this to an end. Thank you so much to all of you for everything that you've contributed to the partnership, obviously, and to today's discussion. Really, really thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who put questions in the chat. We're going to look at what we can do with some of those questions, which we might be able to respond to outside of this meeting. We'll look at how we can do that, okay? Not about anyone's individual case, but questions about this partnership. So thank you all, panellists. Thank you so, so much. I'm now going to introduce Dame Nicole Jacobs, who's going to speak on her reflections on the project. So the Commission has been extremely supportive of this partnership and has come to some events and said very nice things about the partnership. So thank you very much, Dame Nicole. And obviously, Dame Nicole's office has done a lot of work on family justice and domestic abuse, most recently the report Everyday Business, which demonstrates what the issue or some of the issues are for survivors of abuse going through the family court system. So Dame Nicole, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's been really a pleasure to be here. It's amazing to see so many people here. And it doesn't surprise me, because I think we all have a lot of curiosities about how do we begin to make changes at the local level in a practical sense. And with while we might be waiting for implementation of something in the VOG strategy, which I will definitely come back to, that is the question on everyone's mind. And it's exactly why we have hundreds of people here. And it's also why I was so excited when I heard about this project, because that's exactly what you've done. I really appreciate today in the panel, in particular, the honesty that you've given us in terms of, you know, we all would love to rock up to a presentation and hear about how easy something is. But this is, you know, to achieve the kind of cultural change that you want and that you are aiming for. You've given us some really excellent reflections about the challenges as well. So it is true for those of you who I haven't talked to about my office, please have a look, as Joe said, on some of our, at two particular reports from my office that relate to achieving cultural change in the family court from a couple of years ago, most recently in the end of the last year, the Everyday Business Report, which is it is a research report that looks under the lid of the family court. And it was an action from the harm panel. So Olive was talking earlier about the harm panel report. One of the ending recommendations, I was a brand new commissioner at the time, was to ask if I would undertake a research project to look at how domestic abuse is dealt with within the family court. That took a lot to design and took a lot to do in terms of looking at case files in the hundreds in 3 court areas, observing, interviewing litigants, interviewing stakeholders. And the result of that report, you can definitely see online, but the top message from it is exactly why we called it Everyday Business, which is domestic abuse is present within the vast majority of private family law proceedings. And so that leads us to the question, why do we not have a family court proceedings that are absolutely fit for purpose in relation to domestic abuse? And how do we work towards that? And I always want to point out, very importantly, the report I published were not the Pathfinder court areas. So Olive talked earlier about some of the reforms in relation to family court. The research we did were in non-Pathfinder court areas. One thing I would really like to do going into the next year, and I'm talking with the Ministry of Justice about this. I'm an independent commissioner. I'm not a party political. I'm not a government minister. But one of the things that I would like to do is take some of that same methodology, apply it to the Pathfinder court model, make sure we are well and truly heading in the right direction. All of that to say is, there's, my reflections are, there's incredible strides we've made. We've had the Family Justice Council issuing guidance. We've had CAFCAS in both CAFCAS Cymru in Wales and England revising their guidance. In many ways, they're training. There's domestic abuse champions now who are trying to achieve that similar kind of shift in cultural change in lots of ways. But really what you're doing and what you've done in Surrey, as hard as it has been, and it does sound like it has been hard, it's really amazing to hear the honesty, is what will make, tomorrow the biggest difference, today the biggest difference. And that's why I really applaud the funders, Rights of Women, and all of those of you who've been participating in the Surrey Partnership, because you don't achieve cultural change until you're kind of in the doing, I believe. Any changes I've ever seen in relation to domestic abuse, first of all, very often start from the ground up. They don't start in Whitehall or in a meeting in national government that's somehow imposed. It's usually the kind of work that's done on the ground, changing ways that we can do, raising our ambitions about how we address domestic abuse. And that does end up being emulated most of the time. Some of the most fundamental aspects of the Pathfinder court model are kind of borrowing from other ways that we work. And so what I see, not only in Surrey, but I see this everywhere across England and Wales, is kind of a siloed approach. You have the kind of activity within community safety partnerships or county-wide partnerships. You know, you've heard from Alice and others who know that level of activity. But sitting very far away, too far away, is the activity within family court. And what you're doing in Surrey, essentially, is you're bringing that closer together and you're having some of those difficult conversations. I'm sure, and I've been to these anniversaries 50 years ago when we were starting Refuges, there were probably very difficult conversations there too. So our approach as a society to domestic abuse, our approach as services, public services to domestic abuse we should fully expect need to change, because they were never created to fully understand domestic abuse to begin with. We shouldn't shy away from these difficult conversations and the kind of tensions that arise, because of course we need change. And of course that is very difficult for people who maybe have invested years of their professional lives working in a way that they now reflect could have been different, maybe has done some harm, very, very sadly. And this is really difficult change. But what I love about having the expertise of Rights of Women, several speakers talked about creating that space, bringing people together so that you have practitioners of all different kinds, and very, very, very importantly, survivor voice, the kind of role that Kerry and her network of DA Scene have been able to bring to the partnership. You put those ingredients together and you're getting to the cultural change. You can't plan cultural change, you have to do it. And that's in the doing, and in these conversations, that's how you achieve it. And thinking very carefully, Joe talked about, or perhaps Olive did, about these kind of three aims, cultural change, the journey through the court, thinking very practically from start to finish, what could we do to improve? What are the things that we could do incrementally? What are the things we could do now and work towards something better going forward? So often we feel overwhelmed with changes that are needed, but it does take taking some practical steps, mapping that out, really thinking carefully together and agreeing together about what that is. And therein lies your joint working. So there's so much in this approach, which I know probably people from all over the country, all over England and Wales and perhaps elsewhere, are watching, because you've tuned in to see what's the magic. Well, I hope you're understanding so much of what the magic is in this effort is that willingness to be honest, the willingness to create some space, bring in expertise. I think Rights of Women will say that they've learned just as much working in Surrey as they've brought to Surrey. That's an amazing partnership. And thank you to the funders for creating that opportunity, using some of the tools that I think you'll be hearing about next. But also really understanding that it is going to be the practical sense of what can you work out together, what can you start doing. And once you start, things will improve. You'll move on to the next stage, the next ability to change, and keeping folks like Kerry and others really, really central. The VOG strategy will help for that questioner. There is a real commitment from ministers in this government to really drive changes for Pathfinder, and some legislative change. But there's a raft of, I would say, 10 or so really good, solid commitments within the strategy. We've not had family court reform in the last strategy for the domestic abuse anyway. So we are moving forward, and I do think that the commitment is very real, and you'll hear from the president of the family division, I think, next, who deserves quite a lot of credit in terms of his leadership and making sure that this stays very high on the agenda. It's everyone working together. It's not fast enough, and it troubles me when daily I hear as commissioner how people continue to feel, and in the report I just published, continue to feel that domestic abuse is misunderstood, minimized. It's perceived as historical, which, you know, is, there's no understanding of domestic abuse if we understand it to be historical in any way in terms of its impact. So, but I would say the VOG strategy and the kind of movement forward will only go so far, and it needs to be matched with this kind of local energy and effort. Without any doubt, it can't, you couldn't write into the national strategy enough of what it takes to create this kind of energy that you're hearing and seeing in the debate and some of the frustrations that you're hearing from Surrey. That's exactly what we need. And I just am so grateful that you've modeled this. You're giving, I think, the ability for those of us to see some of the tools that you're using. We need to see this in every single family justice board across the whole of England, and similar types of structures in Wales. We've got to see this level of activity now. It's the next iteration. If our first refuges were 50 years ago, this is the here and the now and what we need to be doing more of. And you're part of that. And if you're planning that and doing that in your own area, you're part of that change. So thank you very much. And thank you to Joe and colleagues at Rights of Women for just allowing me to say a few words.
Thank you, Nicole. You've covered a few topics that I was planning on referencing during the next section. So we had a few questions during the panel about resources and learning and how this might be able to be replicated, and we are way ahead of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Hopefully you can, oh, sorry, I can't see anything now. So what we're very pleased to be able to get was we managed to get a bit of funding to get some learning partners on board to try and gather the learning that was going on in Surrey. As Nicole has said, we learned a lot through this process as well at Rights of Women, and build that into a coherent set of resources that would hopefully, and we really do hope that these are resources that are going to be helpful for other areas to be able to maybe do a little bit of work, maybe start from scratch, think about how you might approach doing it. So the resources are available on our website. We worked out, we've set up a webinar, which means there's no chat, so we can't just send you the link, but we have, one of my colleagues has put a question, which hopefully you can see in the Q&A function, a link to where you can, you have to copy and paste it into your browser. We will send the actual link out to you after the event, because we didn't quite manage to organize ourselves well enough to realize we wouldn't have a chat function on a webinar. But I'm going to just show you what they look like so that you understand how to navigate them. So once you've accessed the section of the website that has the resources available, we have got these resources broken down into different themes, the culture change piece, the joint working, the journey through the family court. We also have a bit of background, which is what I set out earlier at the start of the webinar. If you want to download everything in one PDF and print it all out and look at a real paper copy of it, you can do that by clicking on that link. But we have tried to break this down into more kind of bite-sized, manageable chunks of information for you. So we've got, within culture change, 3 different themes around centering the voice of lived experience, trauma-informed practice, and increasing learning and understanding about domestic abuse. Within joint working, we have a paper on improving joint working and coordination. And then in the journey through the family court, we have one on improving the journey through the family courts and harnessing the power of local family justice boards. Each one of these is, if you open it, broken down into the same sections. One on what is the problem, why you might want to focus on that area, learning about how we approached the issue or how partners in Surrey approached the issue, what impact that has, and some lessons for other areas who might want to think about starting this work. We also have one specific paper that we drafted as a result of some of that pushback that we got when we ran the trauma-informed practice workshop, where that was the focus of what we were talking about. And like Alice identified, there was a defensiveness in particular within the judiciary and the magistrates about what trauma-informed practice looks like for them in their professional roles. I think there's often a lack of or a misunderstanding about what we mean when we are talking about trauma-informed practice, and that it doesn't mean that all professionals are going to do exactly the same thing, but it is about the approach and what is the right approach within you in your particular professional role, with the responsibilities you have, the boundaries that exist around that, and how you might be able to start to address that. So we have a paper specifically on the family court judiciary and trauma-informed practice that we hope might start some conversations for some people around what that looks like. And we also, thinking about that piece about longevity, we have written 2 Word documents that you can download and potentially adapt to your area, thinking about that connection between the structures that already exist. So the local family justice boards, and where domestic abuse sits within those local family justice boards. In Surrey, they've set up a domestic abuse subgroup. So we've written a paper that again can be adapted to local areas depending on exactly what's going on in your area, explaining the benefits of the LFJB having a domestic abuse subgroup. And from the other side of the coin, in terms of the community safety partnerships, and where family justice sits in their strategic work, we have a kind of equivalent paper for community safety partnerships. And the idea is to help professionals who might want to start having these conversations think about where to start those conversations. And also you can adapt them, like I said, to your local area, fit in what does your local domestic abuse or VOG strategy say about family justice. We also developed a system map. Now, the president of the family division, Sir Andrew McFarland, is speaking directly after me, and I'm very aware that he doesn't like the term the family justice system. So as we were working with our learning partners in Surrey, I'm going to explain why I disagree with him about that. As we were working with our learning partners in Surrey, we were always talking about the structural barriers, the systemic barriers. And one of the benefits of focusing on systems rather is that you're not talking about individuals. So it breaks down some of that defensiveness that you might come across from professionals who've been working within the family courts for a long time. And part of that work involved the development of a system map. So you can access the system map on our website. And if once you know what a system map is, you can click straight to the system map above. But otherwise, we have a short presentation that explains what system mapping is. So the family justice system, when we're talking about the family justice system and why it's helpful to think about it as a system, that recognition also has to recognize that what we're talking about is not one single institution. We're not talking about one central authority that has all of the control and all of the levers within their control to be able to change things or improve things. But we're talking about a group of people, sometimes individuals, sometimes people within organizations, the organizations themselves, how those organizations interact with each other, how the people interact with each other, the different lines of accountability that each of those organizations have, the responsibilities they have, the culture they have within them, and how sometimes all of those different parts can be acting actually in conflict with each other and sometimes together. And thinking about a system, recognizing that complexity, helps us with two things. One, it helps us recognize how messy it is and how it's not very coherent, but it also helps us start to think about where we might start with changes. So the system map looks like this. It's broken down into 4 sections or 4 groups: culture, joint working, the journey through the courts, and funding and resources. And you can navigate the system map using the tools. You can zoom in and zoom out. But the point of a system map is that each of these factors, when you click on it, you can see that they are connected to each other. Some are more connected than others. Some very central and have significant impact. Each factor is described on the side, and you can close this window and navigate around the system. The solid lines mean that as this factor increases, so does this one. As it decreases, so does this one. Dotted lines mean that as one factor increases, the other one decreases, and vice versa. If this decreases, the other one increases. And we were supported in developing this with our partners in Surrey, and Kerry from DA Scene, I've heard her say a number of times, if you think that this is confusing for you as a professional that understands how the system works, imagine how it must be for a survivor who has absolutely no idea how it works at all. What we hope is that the resources that we've produced, as you go through them and access them, that they will start conversations, that you can have a look through the system map, have a look through the resources on centering the voice of survivors or improving understanding of domestic abuse, and think, well, I can't achieve absolutely everything, like Nicole said, but I could. This is within my control, or this bit over here, that is within my control. I can make a difference there. And we can start to think about how we can create change in a way that's meaningful while recognizing that we can't do everything all at once as individuals. So those are the resources we've produced. I think there should be a link in the Q&A, or there's you can copy and paste it from the Q&A. We will send the link out after the event as well. And having heard everything that's been said so far, the final thing to do is to hand over to Sir Andrew McFarlane, the current president of the Family Division, who is retiring in March, but has very kindly agreed to join us. So Sir Andrew.
Good. Thank you, Olive. I was intrigued by you saying that I disagree with the phrase family justice system. I think you've misunderstood me. What I say, and what we said in the Family Justice Review, is that there isn't a single family justice system. As if you were running Tesco, you would have a single organization with everybody part of the same organization, with the same lines of communication and management. I speak about the family justice system a lot. And when I do, I describe exactly what you described, which is for family justice to work, the various agencies and individuals and bodies that contribute to delivering family justice need to be in touch with each other, realize the lines of communication that they have with each other, the impact that they have on each other and on the delivery of family justice, and be in touch together. So I entirely, whilst I haven't seen your diagram before, I think I saw an earlier iteration of it some time ago, I'm entirely in tune with your description. And I'm sorry if you thought that I didn't like what you're describing. And the manifestation of how this non-single system needs to work to deliver effective justice for victims and survivors in particular, because that's what we're talking about, but for anybody turning to the family court, is provided in one way by what happened in COVID. Before COVID, it was absolutely the case that all the agencies work separately. We all knew of each other, but by and large, we just got on doing what we did in our particular tramline or silo. When COVID happened, those of us nationally responsible for all these agencies began meeting daily and met daily for weeks and weeks, and then it was every other day, and now we still meet once a fortnight. And we got used to sharing each other's difficulties and helping each other solve them. And so that was, in the awfulness of COVID, a real step forward. And I think that happened locally. And then another manifestation of this non-single system working as a system is what we've been hearing about during the course of this afternoon in Surrey. It is a demonstration of just what needs to happen and how hard it is in order to improve the way we deliver justice and to bring about change of culture. A number of people have described how just the doing of it is the important thing. Hearing the accounts of how you got started, and particularly I think it was Fiamma who said it, it reminded me of what happened in Kent about 5 or 6 years ago. There, they were looking for the groups that support separating parents, not necessarily involving domestic abuse, although obviously a lot of them would. And the court sent out invitations to hold a tea time meeting of the various agencies in Kent that were involved, local charities, not-for-profit organisations, etc., etc. And they came, and there were about 40 of them. And I spoke to quite a few of them, and most of them were absolutely astonished that another agency was doing a similar thing to what they were doing almost just around the corner, and they'd never met. They didn't know each other. And so they came together in Kent. And in part, I think that's what's happened in Surrey, what Fiamma was describing. And that's beneficial in itself. It's trying to create some wholesome, holistic organization of the rather disparate groups that are all doing great and worthy things to support people in different ways, but don't even connect or know each other. But bringing people together is important. In family justice generally, in the Family Justice Review 2011, we identified this lack of connectedness, and we promoted the idea of local family justice boards. And again, that's been mentioned a number of times this afternoon. And those of you from other parts of the country looking in at this and wondering what we can do in our area when we haven't got rights of women coming on a special project, getting together, and I'm sure you do, in your local family justice board to discuss what you can do and talk to each other together, and making sure you've got all the agencies involved is a major step forward. As president of the family division, to receive the harm panel report almost exactly 5 years ago now was a very important event. It obviously wasn't good and positive reading if you are the head of the family court. And I realized that this was landing on my watch, as it were, and I was extremely concerned that the family court seemed to be failing to the degree that it was. And I set about doing what I could, with the help of a lot of people, to try and meet the various recommendations of the harm panel report, each of which I accepted, to deliver change. And it's slow, but I think we've moved quite a long way in the right direction. I gave a speech in November to the Association of Lawyers for Children, trying to take a long view of these changes. And if you're interested in what my detailed view about all this is, then you'll find that speech on the Judiciary website. It also was given at a time when the Domestic Abuse Commissioner's report had come out in September, and I was able to engage with that. And again, that was welcome. And it shows, that report, the September report, that if you don't change the system, if you audit it again 5 years later, then the system is still going to demonstrate, I think, traces at least of the behavior that was so concerning in the past. What was also striking from that report was that the prevalence of domestic abuse amongst the people making applications to those three courts was even higher than I've been working on, which was about 60% of the cases. There's no surprise that it's a high proportion because these are the conflicted cases that come to court, but the need for us to be delivering proper safety and protective arrangements for people who come to court is altogether clear to me. The big thing that we've done, and this was led by the judiciary or facilitated by the judiciary, we held all the meetings and helped to develop the concept, is the Pathfinder Court. And it's easy to say, well, the Pathfinder Court is wonderful and that will solve everything. Of course it won't, but I think all people who know about it think it's significantly better than the model we're currently operating elsewhere. And for me, one of the main benefits of Pathfinder is the way in which the local domestic abuse professionals are integrated into the operation of the court. I fear it's right that 10, 15 years ago, if an IDVA arrived at court, a judge may say, what's that person doing in my court? Who are they? Now, in the Pathfinder courts, the judges will say, why isn't the IDVA here? Have you told the IDVA? Where are they? And the importance of that change, I think, is fundamental, but also the importance on a day-to-day basis of the local domestic abuse professionals being involved in the court, talking to the judges about the cases, case by case, day by day, hour by hour, is that by osmosis, by just working alongside these skilled, insightful professionals, the judges will learn and develop a far better informed knowledge and understanding of domestic abuse than you can possibly get by going on any training courses and sitting to listen to lectures or watch demonstrations or the rest. So Pathfinder, as well as just what it does for the cases and as a model of decision making and dispute resolution, what it does for the understanding of the lawyers and judges in the court about domestic abuse is, I think, of fundamental importance. So a message I've taken from this afternoon is that this culture change, whilst to those who have a deep understanding of domestic abuse, ought to be so obvious and so easy, because the courts have been getting it wrong. This is what ought to be happening, and it's not. And for the survivors of domestic abuse to come to court and find that it is the way that it is described must be almost astonishing and horrifying to them. But the message this afternoon is that there's no quick fix. Even with the great insight and assistance of Rights for Women and the particular advantage that they have in Surrey of DA Scene, and I thought Kerry's contribution this afternoon was extremely powerful. Even with voices like that in the room, in the discussions, it's slow. It's slow because we're changing culture, and we're not just changing the culture of the people who come to the meetings, the people who perhaps on this call, on this webinar, in a way, you are to a degree the converted. It's the people elsewhere in the system that need to get the messages are hard. But we've started, and I think conversations like this afternoon show what can be achieved when you start, and we'll surely get there over time. Another thought that struck me listening to Kerry was her metaphor about the supermarkets, listing them all. I couldn't even remember all of them on the list, let alone the scanning mechanisms and the Christmas adverts. And that chimed with me because I'm going to give a talk in about an hour and a half time to another group all about neurodiversity. And there someone has used a metaphor of an individual trying to watch a 3D film without the special glasses on. It's all distorted, and you can't see where the gaps are and where you should be going. And I think for me, it's very important for judges dealing with individuals who may be neurodiverse, but in this context, dealing with individuals who are the victims and survivors of domestic abuse to understand that what we have in the court system is bewildering. Olive's system or non-system map just shows that. And if you're frightened and turning to the Court for Safety and Protection to get a bewildering series of road signs and options and questions, which seem entirely rational to the professional asking the question, or the judge saying, why haven't you done this, is to misunderstand, is to lack empathy for the position of the individual who's coming to the court to gain safety and gain protection. And so I wish that DA Scene, which is Kerry's organisation, was everywhere. But sadly, the victims and survivors of domestic abuse are everywhere. And I'd encourage every local family justice board to try and identify support groups in their area so that they can hear directly from people, sadly, who have the lived experience of this awful scourge on our society, which is domestic abuse. Not because we've been kind to listen to them or because it's good to listen to them, because actually only they know what it's like at their end of the telescope when they come to meet with us. So although I'm retiring, this is very much work that I've wanted to carry on. We've had a domestic abuse roundtable group for the last 12 months, including the whole range of professionals, including Dame Nicole Jacobs, to look at better ways of working. And I'm entirely up for learning more about what we should be doing and getting on with developing locally understanding of different ways of working and then getting on with delivering it. I also think, and I've said this a number of times, in fact I did it in the speech at the ALC, that it's time for the men to stand up. Every group I go to, it's predominantly the female professionals and others who are speaking, and the men are silent. And I've been struck in Australia by the fact that there they got together a whole group of influential men in society, mainly sportsmen, to speak in a film just saying that domestic abuse is unacceptable in a way that separately, differently, smoking, whatever else we've tried to change the culture of. Because in a way, to focus on getting the family court right or getting the health service right, dealing with domestic abuse, getting the psychological services right, it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. And if we're talking about culture change, I'm certainly up for doing something to galvanize a voice that just simply calls it out rather than mopping it up. But that's a bigger topic. So I think the resources, which I haven't looked at in detail, that have been launched today will be very valuable. And I'd encourage every local family justice board to look at it and see what they can do to take these issues forward. It's only by going step by step, bit by bit, that we will move forward in this. But we've got to move forward. And I'm comforted by the examples in Surrey that, hard though it's been, they have certainly moved forward very significantly. Thank you for including me in this webinar. Thank you, Olive.
Thank you, Sir Andrew. It's a very big task you've given us, just end domestic abuse. Well, I think we all agree that that's what we want to try and achieve ultimately. So thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate some people may need to pop off, but I'm just going to very quickly pop on the screen a QR code to the resources. We will perhaps try to send something out addressing some of the questions that weren't able to be answered within the panel. And we would, like I said, encourage everybody to access the learning resources. We'll include a link to the resources again when we contact you. And we are really interested to hear from any professionals locally who would be really interested in trying to recreate or start some of this work, or maybe continue work that you've already got going, and how we could be supportive of that as it goes on. So thank you everybody for coming, and have a good evening.